put them all together, and you've got some serious, serious spiritual concerns about this man. So you can just take, I mean, you can go all the way back to his childhood, where the family that he lived with thought that he was demon possessed and gave him back to his mother. But just going to his first revelation that he received when he was in the cave, in the end, he had an encounter with what later he claimed was the Angel Gabriel. But his initial reaction to it, before other people told him what's going on, we read in Surat Rasulullah. So this is Ibn Ishaq. When it was the night on which God honored him with his mission and showed mercy on his servants thereby, Gabriel brought him the command of God. He came to me, said the apostle of God, while I was asleep, with a coverlet of brocade whereon was some writing, and said, read. I said, what shall I read? He pressed me with it so tightly that I thought it was death. Then he let me go and said, read. I said, what shall I read? He pressed me with it again, so that I thought it was death. Then he let me go and said, read. I said, what shall I read? He pressed me with it a third time, so that I thought it was death, and said, read. I said, what then shall I read? And that's when he gets the first revelations of the Quran. So Jibril here is pressing him so hard and squishing him so hard that he thinks he's dying from this. And that is not the standard way of angels delivering revelation. But before Muhammad was actually convinced by other people, his wife and her cousin, that he's actually a prophet, he interpreted this very differently. So this is what he says in Ibn Ishaq, page 106. He says, now none of God's creatures was more hateful to me than an ecstatic poet or a man possessed. I couldn't even look at them. I thought, woe is me, poet or possessed. Never shall Quraysh say this of me. I will go to the top of the mountain and throw myself down that I may kill myself and gain rest. So whatever he encountered, he thought it was demonic. And the poet and the possessed are kind of in the same category. They believe that poets were like inspired by these jinn or spirit beings that gave them poetry. So he thinks he's actually possessed, and his reaction is to try to kill himself. So Muslims think of this, as a wonderful night when Muhammad starts receiving revelations. Whatever he encountered, he's the only one there. Whatever he encountered in that cave, he was convinced that it was demonic and squishing him, and he ran out of there depressed and suicidal and tried to kill himself as a result of it, concluding that he was demon possessed. And I would just have to say, sometimes your first impression is the correct one.
Exactly.
Faster than you can say mental hospitals, disabled kids ain't hammers, David Wood will get a new Arab boyfriend. So it seems like he broke up with his former Arab boyfriend, Sam Shamoun, and now he has a new Arab boyfriend, Al Fadi. So when David Wood and Al Fadi aren't busy jerking each other off, they're making absurd claims or already refuted claims about Islam and the Prophet Muhammad. So I want to focus on what he says about angels bringing revelation in the Prophet Muhammad's first impression of his revelations. Now, the Prophet Muhammad grew up in Arabia, in pagan Mecca. In pagan Mecca, they didn't know anything about angels, demons, revelations, prophets. Like, they didn't know anything about Old Testament and New Testament theological deliverances. They didn't know about Angel Gabriel or Angel Michael, or they didn't know about like how figures like Daniel, Moses, Abraham. They didn't know how. First of all, most of the pagan Meccans didn't know about those Old Testament figures, and second of all, they didn't know about angels bringing revelations to people, etc., etc. Keep in mind that the Prophet Muhammad grew up in a pagan environment. that believed in superstitions like demons, etc., etc. So just because the Prophet Muhammad thought he was demon possessed doesn't mean he was actually demon possessed. If an angel comes to you, David Wood, and says you're a prophet of God, what are you going to think? Realistically, you're going to think I'm going mentally insane again, or uh, I'm demon possessed or something. You're not going to conclude right off the bat that God is sending an angel, uh, to choose you to deliver, theological news. You're going to conclude the worst. You're going to conclude you're going mentally insane, or you're demon possessed, etc., etc. Same thing with the Prophet Muhammad. The Prophet Muhammad saw an angel that he never saw before, so he thought he was just like losing his mind because that's the normal human reaction of a normal human seeing a supernatural being in front of you. You're going to be scared out of your mind. So that's a normal reaction. But so that's why the Prophet Muhammad thought he was demon possessed, but that doesn't mean he was demon possessed. So David Wood needs to go and read his Bible, a little bit more carefully before pointing the finger at Islam. 1 second here. Let me just get the verses here. Okay, so remember how I said that in Old Testament theology, or in the Old Testament, Angel Gabriel brings revelation to people. So let's just focus on the Old Testament here. Let's just focus on the Old Testament right now. The angel Gabriel looks like a really scary looking man. Angel Gabriel is scary or he has a very frightening appearance according to the Old Testament. When Daniel first describes the angel Gabriel, he says that the angel looks like a man in Daniel chapter 8, verse 15. In fact, uh, Daniel doesn't. Daniel says that Gabriel is a man that I'd seen in the earlier version in Daniel chapter 9, verse 21. So, Angel Gabriel doesn't look like an average man. When Angel Gabriel appears to people in the Old Testament, he actually terrifies people. For example, when Angel Gabriel first approaches Daniel, when the angel Gabriel first approaches Daniel, Daniel is terrified of the angel's presence in Daniel chapter 8, verse 17. When the angel Gabriel comes to Zechariah, who's the father of John the Baptist, Zechariah is scared out of his mind. It says in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 1, verse 12, it says that Zechariah, when angel Gabriel was in front of him, was startled and grappled with fear. So Angel Gabriel does show up unannounced to people in both the Old and New Testaments to deliver revelations. Of course, in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 1, verse 17, the angel Gabriel, or I'm sorry, in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 1, the angel Gabriel also announces the birth of Jesus to the Virgin Mary. So, of course, according to the Old and New Testament, Angel Gabriel is a scary figure. He scares Daniel, he scares Zechariah, because Angel Gabriel his appearance is very frightening to people, according to the Old and New Testament. So this matches what happened to the Prophet Muhammad in the cave. Is that when the Prophet Muhammad saw the angel Gabriel, he was terrified because the angel Gabriel has like a scary appearance according to the Old and New Testament books. So getting to Ibn Ishaq. Now, I don't know how many times I have to say this. I keep saying this over and over again. Ibn Ishaq is not reliable. I've said this like at least 1,000 times now. But even this source of Ibn Ishaq, so I have the book right here. I have Ibn Ishaq's book right here. So even this book refutes what he's saying, because a Christian actually confirms that the Prophet Muhammad was not crazy or demon possessed, and that the real angel Gabriel came to the Prophet Muhammad to deliver revelations. We read in Ibn Ishaq, page 107, it says, then, Khadijah was the first wife of the Prophet Muhammad. Then she rose and gathered her garments about her and set forth for her cousin Warqa ibn Nawfal, who had become a Christian. So Warqa was a Christian, and read the scriptures and learned from those that followed the Torah and the Gospel. So Warqa was learned when it comes to the Old and New Testaments, or he was learned about basic uh, Jewish and Christian theology. It doesn't say the Old Testament and New Testament's here. It just says the Torah and the Gospel, but we don't know what that Torah and Gospel is. So let's just say Old and New Testament theology. And when she related to him what the apostle of God, that's the Prophet Muhammad, told her he had seen and heard, Waraka cried, Holy, holy, verily, by him in whose hand is Waraka's soul. If thou hast spoken the truth, O Khadijah, there comes to you him the greatest Namos. Namos means the angel Gabriel, who came to Moses aftermore, and look, he is a prophet of his people. Bid him be of good heart. So Khadijah returned to the apostle of God and told him what Waraka had said. Tabari said and calmed his fears somewhat. So basically, according to Ibn Ishaq, page 107, the same book that David Wood cites, he didn't read the whole story, because if you read Ibn Ishaq, page 107, a Christian man, Waraka, confirms that the Prophet Muhammad is a real prophet because he's getting the same he's getting revelation from the angel Gabriel, which matches Daniel chapter 8 verse 15, uh, Daniel chapter 9 verse 21, and the Gospel of Luke chapter 1 verse 12. So that's the real angel Gabriel that the Prophet Muhammad was seeing. And according to this book, even though I don't think it's reliable, but according to Ibn Ishaq's book himself, a Christian man confirmed that the Prophet Muhammad was seeing the real angel Gabriel, and this was the real angel Gabriel that was bringing revelation to the Prophet Muhammad in Mecca. So a Christian man confirms that the Prophet Muhammad is seeing the real angel Gabriel, and he's a real prophet from God. And that description of the angel Gabriel matches the Old Testament, matches Daniel chapter 8 verse 15, Daniel chapter 9 verse 21, and the Gospel of Luke chapter 1 verse 12. So the angel Gabriel, according to Old Testament, New Testament, and Islamic theology, has a very frightening appearance. And when people look at the angel Gabriel, they're really afraid, or they're frightened when they see him, because he has a uh, terrifying presence. So this is basically, David Wood needs to read his Bible and needs to read the Muslim sources a little bit more carefully, because this confirms that this was the real angel Gabriel. And the reason why the Prophet Muhammad thought he was demon possessed because he didn't know anything about angels bringing revelations, et cetera, et cetera. So a Christian had to confirm that it was the real angel Gabriel, and the Prophet Muhammad's ignorance was because of the environment, the pagan environment that he was in, believed in demons, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why he thought he was demon possessed, but that doesn't mean he was actually demon possessed. It was just his ignorance of the situation at that time. But later on, it's confirmed that it's the angel Gabriel, according to Ibn Ishaq's, according to this book as well. So that refutes this claim that Muhammad was demon possessed, or his first revelations were of demonic nature. It was the real angel Gabriel. As confirmed by a Christian scholar at his time. Stay tuned. More videos are coming up soon ahead.